letter from the Gantry.
As always, thanks, Neil. Hearty congratulations to Lee Carlsey and his latest band of promising footballers for not only winning the UEFA Under-21 Championships recently, but in doing so, retaining the trophy. England had done that before, but none of the current crop of youngsters were alive when it happened in 1982 and 1984, and it was a fledgling tournament back then. It brought to my mind memories of a 6-year span when I was part of the Sky Sports commentary team covering this very event. 4 tournaments, in fact, between 2007 and 2013, and Gantries in the Netherlands, Sweden, Denmark and Israel. No trophies, but some extraordinary drama, all on the watch of Stuart Pearce, a true football man, if ever there was one, and still so today, playing, managing and now broadcasting. He's rarely been found wanting. Great company, but it does help if you're up on his music scene, I can tell you that, where the gigs are that he's going to go to, and also how Warrington Wolves are doing in the world of rugby league. Stuart's a big fan of that and that team. But we have non-league football in common too, just about, I hasten to add. He started his career at Wealdstone about 8 years after I'd been approached to sign for the same club, and I did train with them. I have to point out, that is where any on-the-field similarity ends, full stop. I would like to think they were good mates, but when he was manager and I was the media, he properly drew a line. In 2007, he steered England in the Under-21 tournament into the semi-final for the first time since the 1980s against the host nation, the Netherlands. England scored first, but having used all their subs, they lost another player to injury, Neda Manuha, and the Dutch equalised in the 89th minute. After that, Stephen Taylor, another defender, twisted an ankle but soldiered on. He helped get the 10 men through extra time, 2 penalties, and then a seemingly never-ending shootout ensued and was finally settled with the 30-second spot kick taken. Ashley Young and James Milner, who both played this season in the Premier League, 18 years on, remember, scored England's first 2 penalties. The second Dutch taker, Royston Drenthe, who later had spells with Everton, Reading and Sheffield Wednesday, missed their second. But that was soon cancelled out by the then Arsenal player Justin Hoyt having his penalty saved. As the shootout went on and on, goalkeeper Scott Carson converted his for England. Despite social media being in its infancy, word got around back home, some kind of grapevine, and the viewing figures revealed that this shootout spike in terms of the people watching actually happened, and we were amazed at that at the time. As England had finished with 10, only 10 players per nation were taking part in the penalty competition, but Taylor had still been on the field at the end of the match, so despite his ankle problem, he had to take his turn. Now, Foppe de Haan, the head coach of the Netherlands, seemed to be losing his head, yelling at the officials and the England staff that the stricken player had to step up. He obviously felt it was a good chance of him not scoring. From the England dugout, Stuart, Steve Wigley and physio Dave Galley met fire with fire, and I thought at the time they were trying to protect the Newcastle player, saying he's not fit to take a penalty. But I found out afterwards that England actually were responding was, we know the rules, we know he's got to take one, so basically you in the other dugout keep your mouth shut. Taylor heroically scored. That made it 8-7 to England. Nigel Reo-Coker had also had his kick saved a couple of turns earlier, but it went to 8-all, each with 2 failures, and then we'd gone full circle. Young and Milner did the job for England again. Hoyt, to his great credit, was not fazed by his earlier miss, and England led 12-11. But then disaster. Matt Derbyshire and Anton Ferdinand, who both scored first time around, faltered with second efforts, and the Dutch won 13-12. Amazing. 2 years later, it was a penalty shootout that played a major role in England's defeat, but ironically, it was a shootout that England won. That was the semi-final too against the hosts then, Sweden. You know the back chat and the gamesmanship that goes on in these penalty shootouts, and England's goalkeeper Joe Hart was caught out by the referee and was booked, but it was his second caution of the tournament, so he was suspended from the final. So now Stuart had to choose between 2 untried keepers for the final against Germany. I saw at first hand how difficult a decision it was for him. He finally told me just on the day of the game that it was Scott Loach, then with Watford, who got the nod over Joe Lewis, then of Peterborough, because Scott was the older and would not be, Lewis was the older and would not be eligible for the Under-21s the following season. Scott would be, and he did play more times after that. But he didn't have a very good night in the final in Malmo. But looking back at the team England faced, even Joe Hart at his very best might have struggled to keep them out. Of that German team, let me tell you this, Manuel Neuer now has 124 full caps. Mesut Ozil reached 92. Mats Hummels, 78. Sami Khedira, 77. Jerome Boateng, 76. It was James Milner's 46th and final under-21 game, still the record, I believe. And there were doubts back then that he would ever step up to the full England squad. 61 full appearances for England followed. What a great pro he has been and still is. 2 years and then 4 years later, England did not get out of the group phase, though they were on the cusp of doing that in Denmark in 2011 with a 1-0 lead against the Czech Republic. Only a few minutes to go in the game. It would have gone through, but they contrived to lose 2-1. Tommy Peckard, who by then had played briefly for Spurs and Southampton, got the winner. England's base for that tournament was a converted sanitarium. We nicknamed it Shutter Island, a Martin Scorsese horror film of the time. Maybe you remember that, and maybe it had an effect. Spain won in 2011, goals from Ander Herrera, who was to have a long stay at Old Trafford later, of course, and Thiago Alcantara, later of Liverpool. And 2 years later, in Israel, Spain retained. It was my first meeting with their coach, the convivial Julian Lopetegui. And Thiago gave us some great interviews in perfect English as well. He this time got a hat-trick in the final, a 4-2 romp of a win over Italy. And England lost all 3 games to Italy, Norway and Israel. And Stuart's time was up. But for him and for me, it had been a great adventure.